We will recognize Mr. Conyers for his statement when he arrives, and at this point, and in the interest of proceeding through witnesses, we will ask other members to submit their statements for the record, and without objection, all opening statements will be placed in the record. And without objection, the Chair is authorized to declare recess of the hearing at any time. Now I'd like to introduce our witnesses. Each one is esteemed. And first, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Richard Land. Since 1988, Dr. Land has served as president of the Southern Baptist Convention's Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, the policy arm of the largest Protestant denomination in our country. He is the host of several nationally syndicated radio programs and was featured as one of the 25 most influential evangelicals in America by Time magazine in 2005. Most recently, Dr. Land has been an active convener of Conservatives for Comprehensive Immigration Reform and has co-authored a white paper on Principles for Just Immigration Reform, which lays out a moral approach to a comprehensive overhaul of our nation's immigration system. Next, I would like to introduce Bishop Kikanis. The Most Reverend Gerald F. Kikanis is the 7th Bishop of the Catholic Archdiocese of Tucson, Arizona, where he has served since 2003. He is the Vice President of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops and a member of the conference's Committee for Migration. He previously served as Auxiliary Bishop for the Archdiocese of Chicago and was the Rector of the Mundelein Seminary. For his extraordinary leadership, Bishop Kikanis was awarded the Cardinal Joseph Bernardine Award in 2008. Next, I would like to introduce Reverend and Dean Matthew D. Staver. Dean Staver is chairman and founder of Liberty Counsel, a nonprofit legal ministry with a focus on litigation, policy, and education. He is dean and professor of law at the Liberty University School of Law. A former Seventh-day Adventist pastor, Dean Staver has argued twice before the Supreme Court of the United States and is the author of 11 books and hundreds of articles. Most recently, Dean Staver has been active in Conservatives for Comprehensive Immigration Reform, a group of over a dozen conservative faith-based groups pushing for an overhaul of our nation's immigration system. And finally, I would like to introduce the minorities witness, Dr. James Edwards, Jr. Dr. Edwards joined the Center for Immigration Studies in 2009 as a fellow. Edwards was a legislative director for Representative Ed Bryant, a former colleague of ours and a member of the House Judiciary Immigration Committee when he served here. Dr. Edwards was an adjunct fellow with the Hudson Institute and was selected as 1998 Lincoln Fellow by the Claremont Institute. Edwards authored with James G. Gimbel, the Congressional Politics of Immigration Reform. He earned his doctorate at the University of Tennessee and his bachelor and master's degrees at the University of Georgia. Now, you have written statements, and those statements will be made part of our official record. We are inviting you to address us in about 5 minutes' time. That little machine on the table, you probably noticed before, when it's green, it means there's a lot of time left, but when it turns yellow, it means and it's always surprising, there's only 1 minute left. And when it turns red, it means actually it's been 5 minutes. Now, we won't cut you off in the middle of a sentence, but we would ask you to try to summarize if it goes red so that we can have time for members to pose questions to you subsequent to the testimony. So with that, let us begin with Dr. Land. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Lofgren and Ranking Member King and members of the subcommittee. The Southern Baptist Convention is the nation's largest Protestant denomination with more than 16 million members and more than 44,000 autonomous local congregations. The Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission is the public policy arm of the Southern Baptist Convention. With an estimated 12 million men, women, and children living and working in an undocumented status in the United States, we have a crisis. And despite the impasse of previous Congresses on immigration reform, I do not believe that crisis is insurmountable. I believe Congress can and should devise a plan to bring these people out of the shadows. The more protracted the delay in action, the more severe the problem will become. I look upon the Arizona law and other similar laws to be a symptom. They're a cry for help from states that are suffering because the federal government has not done its duty. Like other religious bodies, the Southern Baptist Convention has been vocal in the issue of immigration reform. In June 2006, the Southern Baptist Convention, gathered in Greensboro, North Carolina for its annual meeting, passed a resolution by a nearly unanimous vote which called for enforcement of immigration laws balanced with compassion for those who were here illegally, and urged a pathway to legal status for them after having secured the border. Chief among the resolution's admonitions was a call for the federal government to provide for the security of our nation by controlling and securing our borders. Clearly, our federal government has not done that for several decades. Fundamentally, I believe Southern Baptists and other evangelicals view immigration through the lens of their faith. As citizens of the United States, we have an obligation to support the government and the government's laws for conscience sake, Romans 13:7. We also have a right to expect the government to fulfill its mandate to punish those who break the laws and reward those who do not. But Southern Baptists also recognize a biblical mandate to care for those who are the least among us, Matthew 25, to care for the strangers who reside in our land, and to act justly and mercifully, Micah 6:8. Bearing this in mind, Southern Baptists pledged in their 2006 resolution, among other things, to call upon Southern Baptists to act redemptively and to reach out to meet the physical, emotional, and spiritual need classes on a massive scale, and to encourage them toward a path of legal status and/or citizenship. But acts of mercy by the church have been and will remain insufficient to repair our broken immigration system. Nor is the church's responsibility equivalent to the government's. While Southern Baptists and other evangelicals will do their part individually and collectively as churches to reach out to those who are here illegally, only a proper government response can resolve our immigration crisis. Your responsibility and obligation is different than ours. I believe that first of everything must start with border security. We have to secure the border. And I think most Americans do not accept the argument that our government cannot secure the border. The federal government has the resources to do what it chooses to do and has the will to do. The Internal Revenue Service comes to mind. The American citizenry understands if we don't pay our taxes, you will come and get us. And we believe that we have to commit whatever resources are necessary to secure the border. That does not mean to close the border, but it means to have control of the border, to have control over who goes in and who goes out. But, you know, the statement was made earlier that it's immoral. Some people are arguing that it's immoral to enforce our nation's laws. I don't think that's fair, and I don't think it's right. What's immoral is to not enforce the nation's laws for over 2 decades, and then to say, oh, now we're going to enforce the law, and we're going to enforce the law retroactively. You know, it would be like if the government sent out a letter to every driver in America and said, by the way, for the last 24 years, we've been conducting surveillance by satellite on the interstates. And up until now, we haven't had the ability to ticket you for all of the times you exceeded the speed limit. But we do now. And so now we're going to send you a ticket for every time you exceeded the speed limit retroactively over the last 24 years. I don't think most Americans would think that was fair, and I don't think most Americans would accept it. I believe that we have to, once we have secured the border, and I believe that's got to be done with agreed upon metrics on that the government puts together and says and certifies we have met this metric, we've met this metric, we've met this metric. Then I believe we have to have a 6 to 9 month grace period for people who are here in an undocumented status to come forward, to register, to agree to pay fines, to pay back taxes, to undergo a background check, to learn to read, write, and speak English and pass a test, that they've done so, and go to the back of the line so that they are not being rewarded for having come here in an undocumented status behind those who are trying to come here legally. And over a time period, they have the opportunity to then get to legal status. I do not believe that you can strain the English language into saying that that is amnesty. Amnesty is what President Carter gave those who avoided service during Vietnam. I would have let them come back too, as President Carter did, but I would have let them spend 2 years working at minimum wage in veterans hospitals caring for those who took their place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lind.